Hey guys, what's up? It's Carson. So today I'm going to talk about how I outlined my novel, Might. So this is really different from my novel, Valor, my first novel. When I went into Valor, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I came up with these index cards for each kind of big thing that I thought I was going to include, and they ended up not being very useful because they were so broad, they didn't actually help me develop the story. So when I went into Might, I knew that I wanted to do something a little bit different. What I ended up doing was looking up a bunch of different ways to plot novels and how to structure your story, and I ended up settling on the 3-act 9 block structure. I know I've talked about it before. I pulled from Caddytastic and also some other online resources, and I ended up making my own sort of like template for each block and what each plot point in each block stands for, and I will insert a clip of that now. Going off of that, what I ended up doing was going into each of those plot points, so there's 27 of them, and writing out in more detail what I sort of thought was going to happen in that plot point. And then so those are bullet pointed, I would tab in and write again any type of subplot. So for Might specifically, I have a group of characters that are together at the beginning, and then that group splits in two, and then there's a third group. So I would have Hemming, who's the king. You've heard me talk about him before if you've been on my channel. Hemming's group would be the main bullet point, and then the other two would be tabbed in but underneath the same plot point. So when you look at the main bullet points, there's still only 27 that correspond with the 27 chapters in the 3-block structure, the thing that I'm following. So once I had those big main bullet points, when I started, I went right into the first bullet point, obviously. Start at the very beginning. And I looked at it, looked at everything that I thought needed to get done in that bullet point, and I broke it down into chapters from there. So for instance, if you watched my most recent vlog, you know that I was working on chapter 15 of the novel, but chapter 15 is in the 6th bullet point. So 6 out of 27, but it's chapter 15 in the novel. So I took the information in the bullet point, I broke it down into chapters depending on how many I thought would be necessary. Then I took those chapters, and for each chapter I planned out whose perspective it's going to be from, which, if you don't know, I write in third person omniscient. So it's not first person, I don't write in I, but I write sort of from that character, if that makes any sense. I'm sure if you've read something from third person omniscient or you write in it, you know what I'm talking about. But my narrator is sort of in the heads of those characters, but my narrator isn't like a specific person, if that makes any sense. I write down whose perspective it is in. Oh my god. So I write down whose perspective it's in. So for example, say it's one of Hemming's chapters, so I'll write down Hemming at the top, and then I write down sort of what I think is going to happen in there, or what I know needs to happen. So, you know, Hemming sails away on the ship. He has a confrontation with Dag, one of my other main characters. Dag and Hemming don't resolve anything, they go to opposite sides of the ship. And then at the end, I will write down what I think is the main action of that scene. So obviously other things can happen in that scene. It's not just that one action, but that's sort of my way of, like, if somebody was reading my book in class and their teacher said, what is the purpose of this chapter? Why is it here? Why is it its own chapter? That action would be what they said. So for that particular made up scene, like, the action is neither Hemming nor Dag compromise. They're still fighting, you know, nothing gets resolved, and that can be an action as well. It doesn't always have to be like he kills the king or whatever. having nothing happen is also an action. So that's sort of how I've been going about each thing. And when I'm looking at plotting out each chapter as I'm writing them, I'm also looking at the work that I did through the Anatomy of Story. Our light's changing a little bit, so just bear with me. I look at the work I did with Anatomy of Story by John Truby, and I will leave it linked from Amazon down below, which is where I bought mine. And specifically, I look at the work that I did on my characters and sort of plotting out their arcs. So especially the character whose point of view it's from, but also the characters they're interacting with. I want to make sure that at each chapter that I'm planning out, I'm looking at how I want them to progress and how that is fitting in with their character progression and the overall story. And this is what I do for every bullet point. So again, for instance, right now I'm on chapter 15, and chapter 15 is the end of bullet point 6. So right now I am going into bullet point 7 and doing my planning for the chapters that I think will fit into bullet point 7. And I plan all of those chapters out at once, so I don't need to go back into bullet point 7 and see what I've already covered in the first chapter and how many chapters I think I need afterwards. I just know after I plan them all that that group of chapters, whether it's 1, 2, I think chapter 7 or bullet point 7 is 3 chapters. So once those 3 chapters are done, bullet point 7 is done and I can move on, and I have those all planned out with me right away. And that also lets me adjust the bullet points as I go, so I don't have a very strict outline. I can change some things and alter some things depending on what I decided. So if in chapter 3 I decide that Haley gets in an argument with Dag about her hair, and then in chapter 7 she's supposed to cut her hair, she's not going to cut her hair now because she's fighting with Dag, and she wouldn't do that because she's very stubborn. Things like that I can adjust as I go along, and I don't feel like my outline is so rigid that if I change something, all of the dominoes are going to fall apart on the way. This also lets me sort of play around within that one bullet point. So if I want to write, you know, the 3rd chapter in that bullet point before the 1st chapter, I can, because I know already how those all fit together, and it won't be too difficult to change something 2 chapters away, versus if I was doing it all like this and I decided to write chapter 8 before I wrote chapter 1, I would have to change everything going back. It gives me a little bit of leeway, so I don't always have to write chronologically, which normally I do always write chronologically. But if I don't feel like it, if there's a big action scene in that bullet point and I'm writing, you know, the farming scene, I can skip to the action scene and go back to the farming scene, and it shouldn't mess up the overall structure of the novel, if that makes any sense. Like I said, this is my first time plotting something like this, so I don't really know how it's going to work out. I'm almost at the end of Act 1, and I like it so far. I like the freedom that it gives me to mess around with things and to move things around depending on how I think they would work best, but also provides me enough structure so that I don't feel like every time I sit down to write, I'm lost in the story and I don't have anything to anchor me. So that's basically it. If you have any questions about how I outline, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you would like me to upload my little like cheat sheet for the 9-block structure, I can do that too. It's just a little template I put together, but if you guys want it, I can put it in the description box down below as well. And let me know how your outlining works in comparison to mine. Do you like more structure than I have? Do you like less structure? Do you feel like my outline makes me a planner more than a, what do they call it, a plantser or a plotzer, like somewhere in the middle, which is what I think I classify myself as? Let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you see, please hit the subscription box down below. I would love to have you here and keep making writing videos for you. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.